Where were you born and raised, sir?
I was born in Springfield, Massachusetts, but I was raised in Rhode Island, in specifically Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and I graduated from Woonsocket High School in 1943. And after graduation, I graduated on my birthday, my 18th birthday. And after graduation, I went down to the draft board and registered as was required. And that was in June, and in August, I got my letter from President Roosevelt welcoming me into the Army.
Had there been a history of military service in your family before this?
No, I was the first one. And the main reason is because my parents had migrated from Canada, and so none of them were in the service.
What do you remember about the day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor? Where were you? What were you doing when you heard that news?
Well, I was home, but I was in school. I was in high school, and I had the radio going, and that's where I got the news of the bombing, and I knew then that I would be going into service because the war was progressing to the point where they were calling the high school students. And so I knew that the minute I graduated from high school, I would be in.
Were you eager to do it, or just knew that you needed to do it?
Well, I don't think at that time it was eager or not. I think it was a given that you were going, and you just accepted that. You knew that the minute you were over with school, high school, that you were going to be called, and you just accepted that. You know, at least I did anyway, and I think most young fellows did. Now, I didn't enlist; many did. The essential difference was that if you were drafted, you had to go where they sent you. If you were enlisted, you had some options. And I just took that chance and was drafted.
Were you hoping for the Army?
Yeah. I had no real preference, but because I was only 18, you know, and I knew I was going, and I thought, well, you just do your share of the service to get a satisfactory ending.
Where did you go for training, and what do you remember most about it?
My training was in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And just to give you an idea of how things were moving at that time, when we left to go to Fort Bragg, our schedule was to go to a different station. And on the way down, they got a phone call that we were going to change and go to Fort Bragg. So my initial training was at Fort Bragg, and I was there until we left in December. And my training was field artillery. That was my training. And my particular position was the system at the time, this was a 240 millimeter outfit, and you had to learn every position. There were something like 20 positions because that was the crew, and you had to learn all of those. And that was your basic training, and when that was over, then you waited to be shipped overseas. And we left out of Fort Slocum, New York, and on the way out there, I got a phone call from the battery commander, which is not customary. Hardly ever heard from him. And he said, this is very short. Picard, as of now, you're the unit clerk. I had been a cannoneer. I didn't know anything about the unit clerk. But what had happened was the unit clerk took off. He went AWOL. And so, and we were on our way to take the boat to Europe. And so the battery commander had to act pretty quickly, and that's what I did throughout the war. I was a unit clerk, and what the unit clerk does is keep all the records of the battles, of each person, each staff member had to report to me everything, all shots, and I had to keep records of transfers and all the rest. And I worked with the other battery clerks. We had 5 batteries: A, B, C, service, and headquarters. And I worked with them, but kept all the records of Battery C. I was clerk of Battery C. So, and then we went from Fort Slocum, New York. We went on a ship, a British cruise liner, but wasn't very nice, but it got us there anyway. And we went solo. We didn't have any convoy or anything. And we got to England, and they said it was training, but it was very mild training. We were just there until after the invasion.
Let me back up just a little bit. I know you stopped being part of the Howitzer team, but I just want to give folks a little bit of an idea of what that was like. You talked about the different positions in the team. What were those positions, and what did they do in those positions?
Well, you had people who were responsible for the weapons, the bombs. The shell was about this high, so you had to have special people take care of those some distance away from your gun. And then you had people who were carrying these things. You needed 4 people to carry this weapon. It weighed 365 pounds. And so you had 4 people that carried this thing. You had a tray with four handles. And so you had 4 people there. You had a engineer to calculate your settings of your gun. And then you had a lanyard man who waited for the signal to fire, and then pulled the lanyard. And all of these people, this was a big gun, so there were stations on the gun to set all this stuff, and that was it. And you had to learn all those positions. And before going, they had a trial to where the battery commanders assigned each one a number, so that he could see how well you could cope with every position if you had to do so.
Now, 240 millimeters, that's a big gun.
That was the biggest mobile gun that we had at the time. There weren't that many around. We were the 552nd, and there was a 551st. So in Europe, you probably had a dozen of those guns, because each battery had two. And our battery was Battery C, and that's what we did.
How heavy were the shells?
The shell weighed 365 pounds.
Just the shell?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just the shell. Now, to propel that, you needed up to a maximum of 100 pounds of powder. I say powder, but they were granules, and you had a canister that was this high, and there were 4 charges in it. And depending on the range, you got your earphone that gave you the number of charges, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what governed the distance that you were firing. It had a maximum distance of 14 miles, and it was very accurate, very accurate. Our role was, I used to call it a defensive role, because we were always helping other units. We had targets, but it was for some other unit. It might have been for George Patton, Third Army, who needed that kind of help, and he would contact us, and that's what we would do. So we were, I call it a kind of a defensive position, and it was very effective. Very effective. It was difficult to put together. It came in 2 parts, the carriage and then the tube, and they were separate, and they needed a tank for each one to tow it. And when you reach your destination, you got your destination from the engineers, and when you reached there, you needed a construction crane to put this thing together. So it used to take us an average of 4 hours to put this thing together to operate.
What kind of damage did those shells do?
I did a lot of damage. And our targets were bridges, railroad, that kind of thing.
Now, you were in England at the time of D-Day, but not part of D-Day.
Right.
What kind of reports were you getting back, and what was it like to hear that ultimately, while the day was costly, it was successful?
Well, they were very cautious about giving the news that first day, because, as you know, it was almost a disaster. And I don't say that with any fault or anything. They had studied this, and the preparation was unbelievable. But it was a big operation, and so lots of things went wrong. As you probably know, the tanks that came, they had set tanks on floats because you can't drive those in the water, and so they came in, and they hadn't anticipated the consequences. What happened was the floats gave way, and they lost all those tanks. And so there were lots of things like that that were, I mean, if you wanted to be critical, you could, but they had planned this so long, 5,000 ships and so forth, and then of course you had the landing craft, you know, those were very successful, but these poor guys who were in the invasion were facing guns up ahead. So it was not a very happy situation. And so they gave us clear reports. You know, they certain things they kept quiet, but other things were given to us.
Now you went over on D+22.
That's correct.
And where did you go?
We landed at the Utah Beach. And now this is where I say, you know, there were lots of errors made. We arrived at the wrong place. It was Utah Beach, but it was not where we were supposed to land. And the other thing was that we arrived too late to debark, because you had to land to get off. You had to land at high tide so that the boat could go as far forward on the beach as possible. But then you couldn't, you had to wait until low tide to get off. And so we were late, so we had to spend an extra day that way. And we got off without any major problems, and landed up ahead, because by then you could do that. You could get off the ship and go right up to land, and that's what we did. And what you had to do once you get up there, you had to degrease. All these mechanical things were, you know, you're driving them in salt water, and so you had to arrange it so that you wouldn't destroy the engine. And so the first thing you had to do was go up and degrease all of this so that you can now use it. Took us one day to do that, and unfortunately, in the first couple of days, one of our sergeants, nice, good fellow, went off driving his truck, not being aware that it was a minefield. And he hit a mine, and that was the end of him. The truck and he were gone. So it was not a good beginning, but it was better than the drop in the water, you know.
Yeah. So the Battle of Normandy is still happening at this point.
Yeah.
Where did you go first?
We stayed pretty well in the area that we arrived at. You had to leave there because that was to prepare for this. But you were in that area, and we participated in what was called the Battle of St. Lo at that time, which was an awful battle. The streets were blocked. We couldn't move ahead. We had to call for help with cranes and tractors to pave a road to get through, and that was a big delay. They hadn't anticipated that, and it delayed the whole operation.
How would you describe the fighting at St. Lo outside of the gridlock?
How was the fighting? It was severe, but it was all infantry. You know, it was hand-to-hand fighting at that point. And in artillery, you don't have that. You're a little further back, and because you just can't get into the hand-to-hand fighting, so it's more defensive kind of a thing, and you get signals from all the fellows up front who are struggling and need that kind of help. But it was big stuff. We tried to destroy bridges, railroads, buildings, military buildings, and that's what we did. And it was quite effective.
Now, after St. Lo and the Battle of Normandy, the drive was on to Paris, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And that went very well. That bit went very quickly from St. Lo to Paris. And we got a little bit of a break when we got toward Paris. We weren't in Paris, but the little town that we were in, they gave us a break of, I shouldn't say it was a break really, because it was the opportunity to fix our weapons, and because they had been battered all along that St. Lo deal. And so we had, I think it was 4 days where we were able to repair all the equipment and move on pretty quickly from there. Yeah.
Now, you didn't actually end up entering Paris, right?
No. They tried to spare, I gather, they tried to spare Paris. And there was some fighting there, but it wasn't massive, you know, like you would expect a city like Paris, but it wasn't that bad. It was just the way to Germany. It was part of the program, and worked well.
Yeah. And they also wanted the French to march into Paris, right?
Yeah, well, the French were very helpful, and when we first got to Paris, they warned us. They said, look, as much as you'd like to communicate with these people, don't do that, because you won't know who's the enemy and who's on your side. So don't, they use the word fraternize. Don't fraternize with these people. Be polite, but don't get engaged. And because the truth of the matter is that the French underground was very helpful to us, very, very helpful. They would, they knew the rail schedule, and they could advise you of what's coming. And so they were very helpful.
Now, after Paris, I believe your next engagement was the Battle of Aachen. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That was a real bad one, and it was a kind of assignment that they needed us because we were bombing Aachen daily, something fierce, and there was nothing left of Aachen. By the time we and the others got through, there was nothing left in Aachen. The buildings were ruins. But it was a very important break that we got. And then we went on from Aachen, that was Germany actually, on to Holland. We were in Holland. And then we went on to the 4 campaigns. There were 4 campaigns during the war in Europe, and we were in part of all 4.
Wow. Now, based on the information I've seen, sometime between then, or maybe it was at Aachen, but before the Bulge, you had a very good friend named Raymond Bolduc who was killed?
Yes. Yeah, that was sad. We weren't totally clear as to whether Germany had the 240, and the other thing too that was very important was the battle that 240 millimeter. The old fuse detonated when it hit the ground, and you heard the saying, if you hear these things whiz through the air, and if it's coming your way, the theory was hit the ground, because once you're on the ground, when it detonates, it goes this way, so you're safe. Well, they had come out with a new fuse that detonated in midair. They would set it, and it would go in midair. Well, we were stopped in that area, and what happened was one of those bombs came in and detonated over our area. And what happens is it's all iron, and all these pieces of iron fly all over. Bolduc and his friend, you were two to a tent, and it was a rainy night, 6 o'clock in the evening, and these 2 guys were riding home to their wives, and all of a sudden one of these big bombs come in, and Bolduc got a big piece in the neck and got killed instantly. And next to him, his buddy lost both legs. Now this is just a tent, it's just yay wide, and lost both legs from another big chunk of steel. And the tent, of course, was shredded. You know, it was so. But Bolduc, the tough part of that was, not only did he lose his life, but the government, the War Department, made a mistake when they sent the telegram to his wife. They by accident gave the wrong date. I had met her once at Fort Bragg, and she wrote me a letter and said, you know, there's got to be an error because the date they gave me, the government gave me, has got to be wrong, because I've received letters from them dated after that. Can you help me? I can't get an answer from the War Department. Well, our mail was censored, so I had to write and say, I can't tell you much, but I can tell you that the date they gave you is wrong. And I gave it the right date. And I added, and I don't know if I should have, but I said, you know, if I get back, I will go up to see you. She lived in New Hampshire. I said, I'll go up to see you, and I have all the facts, and I'll give that to you. Well, lo and behold, you know, I got back. I went to college, got married, bought a house, and so forth. Didn't get up there for 60 years. And by that time, I had moved to New Hampshire. I was married, I had moved to New Hampshire. And I said, you know, I promised her I'd go see her. And anyway, there were loads of Bolducs in that area. None of them were related. Of course, it's 60 years later. So one day I saw that there was an honor flight, which is a similar thing to what we're doing. And when I looked it up, because I didn't know anything about them, when I looked it up, I found there was a Bolduc there. So I called him, and I could tell immediately that I had the right family. And he said, yeah, he said, he was my uncle, but I didn't know him because I wasn't born yet. He was one of the young ones. So he said, can I come up to see you? He said, we've got all kinds of reports, but none of it is accurate. And I said, yeah, come on up to see me. And he brought his mother and his brother and brought closure to him. I gave him the full story. Bolduc was a truck driver, and since they had the wrong information, they just assumed that he had hit a mine. He hadn't hit a mine. I told you it was fragment in his neck. So brought closure to it, and after 60-some years, and you know, I was delighted to do that, and of course they were delighted to get the information.
Okay, tell me about going to the Battle of the Bulge. How did you get that news, and okay, we're moving there now, and where was your battalion set up?
Well, the problem with the Battle of the Bulge is there was utter confusion because the communication was poor, it was defective, so you're really struggling to figure out what's going on here. And as you know, we had very few people there, and we had very few trained people there. So we were really against the defensive. And General Eisenhower, decided that rather than send people in one by one, let the Germans go to this given point, no further. And when we get to that point, then we will have a strong enough defense to beat them. And that worked. But, I mean, it was the coldest winter of the century. We, because we were a little further behind, managed fairly well. You know, the poor infantrymen, of course, got the brunt of it because they had trench feet and so forth. But we managed fairly well, and was successful in helping beat them. Yeah, so it worked. For us, it wasn't as severe as what you've seen on TV for the poor infantrymen.
How would you describe the combat involving your battalion?
Yeah, we still managed to defeat their artillery, and of course the weather was bad, so we had no air support until I think it was the day before Christmas. And then Hitler had figured this, had figured bad weather and knew that we wouldn't be able to fly. And so the day before Christmas, I think it was, something like 2,000 bombers came over because it was a nice clear day like this. And that was the end of that, because Hitler could make no progress from that point on. But it was a vicious war. And,
what does that sound like, that kind of engagement with those kind of guns?
Well, especially in that kind of weather. The weather has something to do with it. And the noise that this thing made is unbelievable. It's so deep. And to give you an idea, when one of these things landed near where we were, and the next day I wanted to see the damage it had done. And it had a 30-foot span, and the hole was, I went down in it and I had a picture taken, and I look about this big in this tremendous hole. And that's what that shell would do. So we used it effectively.
All right, we talked about the cold in a couple different ways, but how did it affect you personally?
Well, unlike the infantry that was constantly in the cold, we would go to a busted-up building to get away from the breeze, from the wind, and the cold. I mean, you didn't have any heat, but you at least were out of the wind. And so we would, when we were off duty, we were in some of these old wrecked buildings just to get cover. So we fared fairly well.
Did the cold affect the guns at all?
It did take effect because we had to do some repair work after the Bulge. The cold caused damage to the equipment. We had, but once the Bulge was over, we were able to repair these weapons. Yeah.
Do you have any lingering frostbite or anything?
Do I have
any lingering frostbite, cold sensitivity from that?
No, I was fortunate. I managed very well. Most of our outfit did. The guys that had to stand on the gun, they called it riding the gun. There's a certain number of people who would stay on it even when you fired it, and they call it riding it. And but for the others who just set it up and then move away from the gun, it was difficult. It was difficult for those guys. It was one of the worst parts of the war, actually. Yeah.
Now, from what I understand, the next fighting came at the Roer River? Or
Yes.
soon after? Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, the engineers had built pontoon bridges across the river. And these guys were amazing. Overnight, they would build a pontoon bridge across the Elbe or the Roer, and even this heavy equipment, we could get across on that pontoon bridge. It's unbelievable because this equipment was real heavy, and so we managed to get across.
Was there much German resistance there?
No, that went pretty quickly, and that kind of brought the end of the war at that stage, and so we were effective, but it was quickly. It wasn't a long, drawn-out thing, because that was the end for Hitler. You know, he tried desperately to keep that bridge, and we got, not we, but the Allied forces got to the bridge before he did, and he had rigged that bridge to collapse, detonate. It was all geared by the Germans. And we knew that, and he wasn't able to use that because we got there first.
That's Remagen.
Yeah.
And so, was it a similar story getting across the Rhine because you had the bridge and little German resistance?
It was a similar story, yeah, because he was clever. He had rigged the bridge, all the bridges, because he knew that was the final stop. You know, if we got across the bridge, he was done. And so he knew that, and so the trick was to get to that bridge before he did, before he could do anything with it. And we were successful with that.
How did you hear that the war had ended?
The word came very quickly, and it was, I mean, everything stopped like a clock, and joy and wonderful feeling about winning the war. And I have pictures in that pamphlet of the battery commander and all these people that on that day that are in that pictures that I had taken, and I never did give them to them because we in short order, you know, they had. The government had really planned a nice method of getting our people home, and that was an experience too, because you've got 16 million people that want to go home now. Impossible. So they used every kind of ship to ship you back. They had a point system. And I came back from Le Havre, France. Got on a ship there, and it was not a very good ship. And on the way home, we hit a storm. One of the seams let go, and water was coming in. So they slowed down to 3 knots an hour, which is really nothing. You're not gaining anything. Finally, they were able to repair it, and we got to Newport News Christmas Eve, and when we got there, when we got to Newport News, the base was closed. There was nobody there to get us off the ship. And so the chaplain radioed in, and they got a crew together to get us off the ship and prepare a dinner for us at 3 o'clock in the morning, Christmas morning. So it was a very Merry Christmas, believe me.
Definitely. Last couple of questions, Mr. Picard.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of from your service?
Well, I did the best I could with what I was assigned to do. I started as a cannoneer, ended up as a unit clerk, and even that was important because you wanted to report correctly what was happening and what was happening to our people, and just how well we were doing with our assignments. All of this was, you kind of felt that you had I won't say major part in the war, in the ending of the war, but certainly an effective part of it. When people ask me, what I thought of my duties, I would say, well, I'm no hero. I'm just one of 16 million people who fought this war. And the fact that we all worked together brought an end to it. And that's kind of the way I looked at it. I was just glad I could do my part.
Last question, sir. What does it mean to you to have us record your story and share it with current and future generations?
Well, I realize now the importance of that, because I never went for interviews. I never belonged to all these different military organizations. I just took the position that, it's over. We did our bit. We were successful, period. And never thought of keeping a record of it. And now, of course, because there's so few of us, there's concern that this will be lost forever. And so I welcome it now. School calls me to talk to the kids about it and so forth, because sadly, as we travel through Europe, all the kids know the war. In our country, unfortunately, we lack that. So now I realize that, and I welcome the opportunity to speak to people like you and the students at school. Yeah.